Hi all, I have another very interesting Leela chess game. So this is by Edward Panic. So it's again Stockfish development version, 18th of August 2018. So Leela ID 10928, a very high Leela ID. 10 is the 10th wave of test server, I believe, something like that. Anyway, C4 from Leela. We have the set opening book. It starts off like the wet lettuce system, what I call the wet lettuce system, A3, knight f6, and the book. What can Leela do with this position against the mighty Stockfish development version? Well, rook b1 is played, so that does indicate that maybe b4 in the future is possible. e6 is just ignored, though. Leela doesn't actually commit to b4 here. d3, black castles, knight f3, d5, and white just castles. Queen e7, bishop d2, rook d8, queen c1, as though there might be an idea of bishop h6 in the future. Queen f8 actually prevents bishop h6. That's cute, isn't it? Preventing bishop h6 like that. Bishop f4, and we have now b6. It might be possible for black to also play d4. This position, it looks as though it's about even, but maybe white's looking forward to b4 later, and that was possibly why it's rejected by the Stockfish in calculation. So b6 just keeps the central tension going. e4, trying to commit black, and black actually does commit to d4, in fact. Knight b5. And here, yeah, this is interesting. It looks as though this is a bit cheeky, isn't it, because of a6. But actually knight e8 is played. On a6, it's possible, because of this loose rook on a8, white can actually pounce with knight d6 and threaten to take that bishop. And if we have rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes, there's e5 here, opening up that bishop potentially against the rook. So for example like this, bang, hitting the rook. White should end up with a small edge at the very least. So yeah, it's interesting. Another possibility here, you might think this is reasonable, knight h5 as well. So this position with a6, there's a way of counter-attacking that knight on h5 though, so white should be fine here as well with this kind of continuation. It should be okay. So knight e8 is one of the better responses though. e5. Now this does set a tone, e5 though, for potentially entrenching a piece in f6 at some point later, as well as supporting d6 in the short term. And actually we have bishop d7 here. Okay, bishop d7, let's carry on from that. I mean, wait a moment though, a4 to give the knight a3, there's e5. This would be actually quite nice for black, this position. There's absolutely nothing for white here, it seems. Black would be doing really nicely. So e5 does establish a kind of bind space advantage, stops black from playing e5, keeps the e4 square available, which could be used for f6 later, for knights popping into f6. So bishop d7, a4, knight b4, hitting d3, that's protected, bishop c6, rook e1, reinforcing that central point, a6, knight a3, h6, h4 to stop any g5 nonsense in the future, queen e7, knight h2, offering the exchange of bishops, and also knight g4 might be on the cards. Bishop takes, check, king goes back, knight c6, b3, we have rook ab8, queen e2, queen d7, rook bd1, some shuffling here, but now knight g4, hitting the h6 pawn. We have h5 kicking that knight. You might wonder here, yeah, at the moment, so h5 kicking knight h2, queen d8, knight f3, knight a5. Now here it gets interesting. It looks as though shouldn't white protect b3, and there's a kind of mirroring tactics about damage to pawn chains here. b3 and c4 for white, and f7 and e6 for black. There's an intriguing kind of logical counterattack variation. So white's counterattacking against this pawn chain, leaving b3 behind, and it does seem as though taking on b3 is risky. in this case, in this particular situation, black played queen e7, rather cautious. It does mean that the sliding block puzzles is activated, get the queen getting out of the way of the rooks. So if the bishop gets out of the way of the knight, the rooks can be used for the f file, for example. And you'll see that here, that if white in this position, well, let's see that in fact without queen e7 taking this pawn. This is just a little bit of intrigue here. g4, and basically, let's have a look, a taster. This kind of thing, bishop h6, as I say, sliding block puzzles delayed because the queen's on d8, and white can end up really smashing black here in this line. That's an example where actually black's really in trouble, absolutely in mega trouble here. Getting crushed, in fact, absolutely getting crushed. And a more tenacious variation than that, on HG, queen takes, here, in fact, instead of HG, much more tenacious though is bishop h6, sliding block puzzles, knight to move, etc. Sack a pawn here for knight g7. Try and use this semi of an f file that's about to be created when white wins a pawn. But you'll see the slight difference. This is what I mean. This pawn structure is now targeted. e6 is targeted this position. If you look at this position, there's a slight nuance here. White can take on e6 tactically because of that loose bishop, and white ends up with an advantage here, a big advantage. So what black did is actually making that whole thing, the whole defensive technique of bishop h6 much quicker now, and it changes the picture significantly to the g4 attack line. White actually humbly went to protect the pawn. The whole g4 attack line is influenced by one tempo here. This position, sacking the pawn, you'll see that because the queen's got out of the way with the sliding block puzzle effect, black has rook f8 here, and after rook e4 there's knight h5, and you'll see that the extra pressure immediately on f4. Yeah, so if knight takes e6 here, there's knight takes f4, and this is very, very different. This position is only a small advantage, if anything at all. So a little bit of interest there, why queen e7 really is prophylaxis against g4, because the bishop h6, knight g7, it's very, very precise chess, it seems. Very, very precise prophylactics going on here behind the scenes. So queen c2, leader's not too disappointed. Just goes and protects b3 after all that. So, okay, rook b7 here, and the knight improves, knight b1. It's not really doing much on a3. Queen c7, and in fact, it's heading for that lovely, jubbly e4 square. So b5, a takes, and it's also holding c4 here, so no rush. We have rook a1, knight c6. If b takes c4, then the knight is usefully placed for knight takes c4. It's too dangerous for black to play knight takes because of rook a3. This position, this is very nice for white here. For example, this, rook takes, and white ends up with a nice advantage. Look at the knights, look at the pressure. So knight c6 was played. This knight goes here actually, so reinforcing that e5 pawn. Overprotection, Nimzovician overprotection it seems. There's 1, 2, 3 pieces holding e5 now. B takes, rook a7. Rook takes, queen e2. Yeah, big overprotection of e5 situation. Bishop f8, knight d2. Bishop e7, knight e4, and there's a threat of potentially getting a fawn pawn, the dreaded fawn pawn. Queen c7. Now here, rook a1 is played, rook b8. Knight f3, queen b7. Bishop g5, trying to weaken black on the dark squares, bishop f8. Yeah, if bishop takes, let's show an example here. F takes is interesting. If knight takes c5. hitting the queen, hitting the knight. This continuation, because of the rook infiltration, it's actually very dangerous. Threatening things like f4 now is very dangerous for black. This ends up much better for white. So bishop f8, queen d1, rook a8, rook takes, queen b3, queen a1 check, king g2, queen a8, queen b5, probing, knight c7, the queen comes back, knight a6, queen a2, pinning for a moment, knight c7 unpinning, offering queen exchange. Now check, and the queen comes to the center actually instead of the queen exchange. There's nothing really to be gained at this moment from this queen exchange. This is, although it's pleasant for white, it might not be too much to try and win with. So queen e2, bishop e7. We have actually king h2 getting out of the dangerous diagonal, so kind of freeing the knight. Knight e8, and here things get super interesting. Queen e4 is played. Now this creates a pin situation. If queen c8, well, queen c8 was the move, pardon me. If knight takes f6, we see that e takes, bishop takes, white can just take on f6 and then bang, knight e5, exploiting that pin with a big advantage. So black's going to be losing a piece. So we see this unpinning move, queen c8, and now queen f4. So menacing threats here, including, well, black actually gave up the dark square bishop, which is a bit of a desperate move to play, because logically that would weaken the dark squares and give white the dreaded form pawn, THORN. Is Stockfish Dev going to lose to a form pawn? And you might think at this point, is everyone on the Leela chess forums finding form pawn games, or is it just a coincidence? I don't really know what's going on. I'm not joking. I don't know what's going on, why this is another form pawn game. I haven't selected all the games, filtered them out systematically to find form pawn games. This just happens to be another one. It's just Leela's style of play. She overprotected e5, and a logical consequence does seem to be to get an aggressive form pawn here. You might think, well, black can avoid this situation. No to the form pawn with queen a8. The problem is, there's a kind of, this knight on f6 is a nasty creature. After g4, hg, knight takes, queen c8, bishop takes, queen h6 check, and because the two knights and the queen are just super aggressive here. Look at this, knight g5. Black is not in a position to defend this position. It'll be all over in that case. So we do have this situation where the dreaded form pawn is created. And what's remarkable about this is, okay, so queen h6, threatening checkmate on h8. So black takes and has to defend with the only move queen f8. Now what's remarkable is really coming up here, what really caught my eye eventually about this game is this position. This position. Believe it or not, I do find this exciting, and you might think, have I lost it? Have I totally lost the marbles? The reason I find this exciting, and I hope you do eventually as well, if you haven't already, is that the form pawn is creating a zugzwang already. Believe it or not, in this position, it's a zugzwang already. White just plays king g2. And what does black actually do here? The queen has got to keep guard of g7. It can't go too far away because of queen h6, queen g7 mating. And black commits to e5, and you think, what? Why is black committing to e5? It's a lovely blockade square on e4. Okay, it keeps an eye on f6, but that's a big commitment. But if we look at this position, if we look at knight a5, for example, knight e5 is strong, pouncing in the e5 square. But even better is g4. You know, knight e5, example, knight c6, queen's on the light square, bang, queen h6. Sorry, let's check there. Well, no, it's not quite right. Okay, I'll stick with my notes. Punishment for me. I'll stick with my notes. My notes indicate g4 here is very dangerous. hg, and now knight e5. That stops the check. That's important to stop the check. But also, I think there's a big difference here actually. It's about g6 as well. It looks as though this is crushing actually. Knight takes g6. Forget taking on c6. This looks absolutely crushing here and there. And if here, then check, and then this f7 check is devastating. So yeah, it is. The knight's pouncing to e5 with deadly effect for sacking on g6 here, for example. And I actually definitely made a note of queen b8 though, not knight c6. So here, h5, check. There is a check there, and the king sidesteps the checks. Although f2 is hit here, knight takes g4, white's got a massive advantage. Winning advantage, g6 is crumbling. So this position already, if you appreciate it, basically it seems as though the knight can't step away from e5 because of knight e5. And then maybe knight takes g6 is the key point. And so black commits to e5, and we have this situation now where the form pawn's reinforced by a lovely knight on e4. And this position is also basically a long-winded zugzwang. This whole position is a long-winded zugzwang. Black is actually helpless here. This knight is superior to this knight, blockading, protecting the deadly form pawn, potentially deadly. White just plays queen c1. All white needs to do, if white had 2 extra moves after queen c1, we'll go around the back with queen a3, queen a8, queen f8. And this would be killing a queen on f8. But also in this position, you'll note, in this position, by the way, that the c5 pawn is also a bit precarious. So black actually played knight b4, not only protecting c5 but hitting d3. Now we have queen a3. The deadly threat is queen a8 to f8. And black seems to be again in a zugzwang here. We have queen b7 in the game, pinning. Okay, this unpins. Queen a6 now, and you might wonder why queen a6, because queen a6 basically results in a lost knight ending. And you might think, well, queen a8's been extinguished, but there's queen a4 you see, and queen e8. If we look at the lines instead of queen a6 for a moment, queen b8, white just takes on c5 safely. King g8, white takes on c5, let's rule those out. Queen b6, white plays queen a8 with idea queen f8. So here, queen f8, winning. Form pawn held by the knight. Check here. Yeah, it's going to be mating with queen g7. Queen c8, holding the pawn. Queen a7 in this case, hitting f7. And if here, knight takes c5, this is actually very, very good for white. So look at the variation notes in the pinned comment of this video. So it seems that this position is causing no end of trouble for black to have to play queen a6, and it allows white to misplace this knight, so it actually can't defend e5 because of this check, this killer check, pushing the king back to defend f7 because king h6 knight takes his check anyway. So defends f7, but now the knight's ready for a quick knight f3. White just takes on a6. Just knight f3 now. Winning knight and pawn ending. Black cannot defend e5. Black sacrifices the pawn a bit desperately. And now there's even this knight e5 keeping the black knight out. Also keeping the king. If the king wanted to walk into the position, it can't now. Keeps everything out. f4. Now, actually, knight d3 hitting c5. That's defending c5. e5. The idea was just to get this position now. And black desperately plays this, just giving up c5 for c4. But king f2 for a moment, then the exchange. But this weakens d4. This position is absolutely lost for black. The game ended here. So kind of adjudicated as win for white. Both sides' evaluation was really high for white. Now, if knight e3, the only thing to watch out for here is not to play this, because then there's check, and that's equal. But this position, white can just take on d3 and safely kick the knight back with, say, king f2, but if the knight moves voluntarily, this position, I'll give you an example continuation. White can basically convert even by exchanging knights like that. f5, this is just a winning position. This position is absolutely winning. An example, that would be dragging the pawn forward to queening. So, yeah, Leela, even with the wet lettuce of openings, manages to somehow establish a strong central point on e5, which is then converted into the dreaded fawn pawn, THRN, which is enough to beat Stockfish Dev, basically. It's like multiple Zugzwangs seem to occur after that fawn pawn is there. e5 is virtually forced, it seems, because if the knight moved, then knight e5 taking g6 in variations. Once e5 is forced, the beautiful blockade holds the fawn pawn. Queen just zips round the back, threatens to zip round the back, and causing a misplaced knight, which loses that e5 pawn, which was basically an increased liability when e5 was pushed. That liability was just enough to lose the knight and pawn ending. It's really high precision quality stuff, but this is a Stockfish Dev game at a 5-minute time control. It's something to behold, the inaccuracies which cause the downside, which cause black to lose this, I thought. I hope you found it interesting. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks so much.